Welcome to Seniors for Peace in person, which is a change from what we've been doing recently. And I'm glad that there's actually an audience here today. I didn't know whether we would have an audience or not, but it's nice having people to join us for this program. We think that we're also being broadcast on Channel 3. Simulcast, I think, is the term that they use in the industry. But in any event, we will have our program here for those that are here physically. And our program today is about the Growing Grounds, which is an outreach program of the Wabash Church of the Brethren. And it's been going on for several years, and it's quite extensive. If you want some other information other than what you're going to hear today, they do have, if you go to Wabash COB, if you go to the Wabash COB website, they have a Growing Grounds little section there that provides some information about the program. But we'll learn a lot more about it today. And we have 4 presenters who are going to be sharing information about Growing Grounds. And I know all of them fairly well, have known them for a while, quite a while. So I'm going to introduce all 4 of them, and just briefly from my background with them. I'm going to start out with my cousin, Carol Horn, who is a cousin of mine. I don't know that I've ever tried to figure out what second or third or something like that actually is, but she's someone I've known since college, because she was in Manchester College, I think about the same time I was, and so she's going to be one of the presenters, and her husband Dennis, who also graduated from Manchester College. In fact, all 4 of them graduated from Manchester College, and so did I. So it's sort of a mini alumni gathering here, which is something that happens around Timbercrest fairly often. But we're glad to have them here. And then we have Jim and Kay Geyer, who probably many of you know. I mean, many of you probably know the Horns also. They're not strangers around here. They've been here before. And so it's nice to have them back joining us today for this program. Jim and Kay were also students at Manchester College at the same time I was, so I remember them from college. And then they moved to Lansing, where I was living, while Jim was working on his PhD, while he was receiving his PhD from Michigan State University. And so I got to know them and their family at that time. So I believe at this point that's enough of introductions. I know Kay Geyer was pastor of the Wabash Church of the Brethren for a while, and I don't know whether they're going to give any of their backgrounds or not, but I understand that Kay is going to present first. Welcome, Kay.
Well, good morning. Seniors for Peace has been an inspiration for me. Seniors for Peace has been an inspiration to me ever since I moved here. It's one of my favorite groups at Timbercrest, and now in a few months I'm going to be 70, so I feel like I'll be joining the Seniors for Peace at that time. So glad to be here. And when we were thinking about how to tell the story of Growing Grounds, it's a 13-year process, so the story is long. But the beginning, I think, happened even before the 4 of us were working together. I think I started to think about it as the conception of Growing Grounds came from the meeting of the right people with the right stories at the right time and the right place. And Carol shares her story of her experiences while working at ECR, going into the jail and doing mini workshops or classes for inmates. And while she was there, she just felt a really strong appreciation for who these women are and a deep understanding for the obstacles that they face as they try to continue their lives, try to continue to grow. And she wanted to find ways to be supportive of those efforts going forward. My story with criminal justice or incarcerated folks began when I was a student at Manchester College. My major was in sociology, and T.Q. Evans, for one of my Jan term experiences, set me up to live and work in the Indiana Women's Prison. And so I lived in an apartment inside the prison, and I spent my days working with the staff there and the prisoners there. And I felt like I got a new appreciation for who these people are that are in prison and what their lives have been like. And then the following school year, I took a course in criminal justice. And then that led me to do it for a summer. I was a summer school teacher at a Wood Youth Detention Center in Fort Wayne. So that was sort of my beginning, my roots in doing this work. And then when I moved back to North Manchester, I started assisting folks who were already doing programs in the jail. Some of you know Judy Brown was doing a knitting program, and Annie Clark was doing a bead program, and we also had a Bible study program that I was part of that maybe some of you know folks who are part of that. And in that, I also got to sense that would just develop in me a passion for doing something that would expand the options for these women as they were released from incarceration. And then when I became a pastor at the Church of the Brethren in Wabash, I felt immediately at home, not only as in my ministry as a pastor, but because the folks there, many of the folks there were already in the jail, were already doing the work. Carol and Dennis and others, Laura Lee Krebs and others were already a presence in the jail. And so I felt immediately a home, not only in my ministry, but in the mission. I identified so strongly with the mission of the church. And so I sort of experienced it as a perfect storm of the stories of these individuals and of the church as a whole, as we continued our ministry together. The contribution of Growing Grounds was confirmed early on by a generous financial support of Global Women's Project. And we were and continue to be the only program, I think you can see us up there in the red, in the area, we were the only program and continue to be the only program that Global Women's Project supports in the United States. Over the last 13 years or so, the work of Growing Grounds has taken many different forms. We've tried things out that worked, and we continued. We tried things out that didn't work, and we haven't continued them. And we've expanded the vision of who we are and what we're about. But we did strive to follow our vision in all those things. And our vision was to provide a nurturing space where we bring together justice, respect, compassion, and opportunity so that hope can take root and blossom into new life. And what we want to share with you today is our, what I call now, brief but spectacular overview of our journey towards that end. And we'll start with the mission statement that's been developed recently as we've expanded our work. And I'm not sure I can read that. This initiative strives to provide a new start for women and men and families in Wabash County, where choices have become limited by the impact of life circumstances or past incarceration, but who are motivated to improve their quality of life, expand their work and educational options, and build on positive relationships. So that's the mission statement of Growing Ground. And now you're going to hear stories about how we work to fulfill that mission.
Okay, so this is our, these are some of our community partners, and I feel like I have to say some of, because as I revised this slide over and over and over and over again, because as you know, we put down the people we've worked with most recently and at kind of the top of our heads, and then as you know, a day would go by and say, oh, well, wait a minute, you know, the Gemmer Foundation also helped us, and oh, remember Chili for Charity, the cook-off down in Wabash, they've helped us, and we worked a lot with the extension folks at Purdue, and so this kind of goes on and on and on, and so I like to think that I've captured a lot of them, but they're probably not all there. You can see basically this is a very widespread opportunity. Kay, would you change the slide for me, please? And so one thing that happened on this is in 2014, we sort of formalized some of these relationships. I think mostly Carol had worked with a group called Homes for All. Okay, sorry. Close to a group called Homes for All. And it's grown into, our acronym is HAWK, and it's a group of agencies in Wabash County that have the common goal of providing homes, or at least temporary, for the homeless within Wabash County. And so we work on emergency housing, we work on rent assistance, we help on developing lots of different housing options, with the feeling that housing is really the foundation on which success has to be built. Now, this is basically a quick thing of what we fund. And you'll see that there's a wide variety of things. But I want to highlight a couple of these. Looking at housing, and this is 2 years. A thing I think is sort of interesting about this is that, you know, this is the pandemic year. 2019 was before the pandemic, and yet you can see our funding profile hasn't changed a whole lot. And I need to point out that our biggest one by far is housing, and I want to mention here that of those two, we have $18,000 the first year, $17,000 the second year. Altogether, $25,000 of that was a contribution of ours to another organization called Advantage Housing. $10,000 to help buy a house that we'll be showing later, and another $15,000 to help renovate that house, and another one. But the financial part is actually only a part of what we do. We've provided direct financial assistance for 51 families and 4 groups of people over these 2 years. Material assistance, we're talking about furniture, which Timbercrest has helped a lot in that area, but not only furniture, but also household goods. All of these things are going to be detailed later. But anyway, over 100 families over 200 families in food assistance. and Carl.
Well, I look out here and see people who are already connected to Growing Grounds, and your stories, if we could just be sharing stories, it would be good to get those from you, and we thank you for your part. Walking with. Who is my mother, or brother, or sister? Words of Jesus. And when I look at the young women and men who come into our lives, I think, well, who is my daughter or my son? So I'm going to give you a little glimpse of how we try to walk with these people as we might our own relatives. Taking a person to the Social Security office in Marion to get an ID. Often when they leave jail, they don't have any of their papers left, and they need the ID for everything that they do. So that's one aspect. Getting them connected to a free phone, we try to do that. Also connected to housing, which we'll talk more about later. That's the big one. Going to schools, early learning centers with moms to try to get their many children enrolled in good programs. Taking them to doctors, eye doctors to get glasses. And the dental needs are big because of poor nutrition, hygiene, and drugs, they often don't have their teeth. And so that's a factor in life too. Walking with means listening and more listening. Taking them to interviews for jobs and then taking them to the jobs. Trying to relate to their children. Getting them started with transit and other community services. Picking up their phone calls after they have disappeared from our lives for months. And here they are again.
Food is always an issue. At the Wabash Church, we have an outside little food pantry and we have a lineup of people from the church who fill it up daily, and it gets utilized every day. We also have additional food inside. The other photo shows a little bit of that. And the person at the church, Larry Jamerson, who goes once a month to pick up the food at the Milford Food Bank, and in recent months they've also started giving out food boxes that have some perishable items in it, and he goes a couple times a month to get some of those for some of our folks. Then we also, people oftentimes are without furniture. And by the way, this photo over here is not a rerun of the Clampett family going to Beverly Hills. It's not a rerun of that. And if you look carefully, both of those two photos were taken on the north side of Timbercrest here, because we do frequently get donations of furniture as people downsize, etc. And these are the trucks and trailers that we utilize. And then the photo with people in it, you can see the four of us, perhaps. And then Dave and Audrey Hahn from our church. Audrey's parents, the Books, were here. And then I think it's behind Kay and Jim is Murray Cox, a neighbor of ours and a member of the church. We've gone as far as Rochester and Columbia City, as by word of mouth people find out about our furniture donations.
And back several months ago, the room at the church was overflowing with furniture because things slowed down a little bit during COVID, but not too much. And now in the last couple of months, the room is getting a little closer to empty. Late last week and early this week, at 2 different times, I was in there meeting people who were picking up beds and couches and chairs, kitchen items, etc., that they needed. One of those persons had just moved from Las Vegas, had lived there for 50 years, I think she told us, had nothing. And so she picked up some things to help her get started.
We also have a collection of clothing for children and for adults as well. And Carol's going to talk more about this, but I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Corrine because she has made, I don't know how many quilts that for the children, and it's such a one. I wish you could be there, Corrine, when they get them. They're just so delighted with the colorful and very child-engaging quilts that she makes. So I just want to say that thanks to Corrine for that.
Many of the items that we get donated and then we pass on are household items, dishes, just about anything you can think of that you and I might typically have that they need. And sometimes people don't have a way to get around transportation-wise and they need to get to a job or whatever. So on more than one occasion we have found either donated bicycles or purchased used bicycles. And I remember one guy who for a number of weeks rode about 4 miles each way, each day to his work and back so he could continue working. Another connection to Timbercrest and to the Manchester community with our outreach is that sometimes these bicycles need a little bit of tune-up and repair, and we've brought several of those to Brian Kersowich, who has helped out a lot with that part of our ministry with bicycles. We'll talk a little bit later about some of the other transportation that we help out with. For the last couple of years and beyond, we've spent several $1,000s a year helping people in various ways with rent, either helping them get started in a new apartment with perhaps their deposit and a month's rent or so, or somebody who's behind, helping them get caught up so they don't lose their housing. So we've done a lot with payments for rent and related kinds of things. Okay.
We work closely with probation and community corrections, and in fact, amazingly, there are men who are on work release located in the lower part of the jail have been released for those hours that we have the monthly meetings to be with their families, and so we see some pretty neat reunions with families where they can't be together otherwise. At these meetings, we've cooked with them, and then they've eaten their creations. We have planted with them tomatoes, flowers to take home and grow. We always have games and interaction and art aspects their children. We've played inside, we've gone to the reservoir and cooked out with them and hiked, made Christmas cards that they could give to others, had topics such as positive parenting. We brought in an attorney to help answer their questions. So it's a really neat time of interacting with families that are connected to Growing Grounds, probation, community corrections, or just the community. We've spoken a bit about classes in the jail. The site, for instance, when I was doing classes in the jail, I would see women come to the lobby. Maybe they had a little plastic grocery sack of something, but that's all they had. And they had no place to go, literally. They had been released, but no place to go. So that image propelled us to work with this. We're really lucky that Sheriff Wheatley and his wife Esta, and then later Sheriff Leroy Stryker, allowed us into the jail, and the people from Manchester who previously did that into the jail, because it doesn't always happen in counties. I think maybe that's all I'll say about that. Okay. Okay. The United States has by far the highest incarceration rate. All told, about 1 in 40 adults in the U.S. are in prison, jail, or on court supervision. So there are plenty of folks just in their bunks with nothing to do. That's part of the jail too. Okay, let me see. We work closely with the courts and with their services. Let's see. Often when they get out, they have many fees from their court dates. They also are on probation usually, and there are many, many costs ongoing for years with probation costs. They also have to take classes, and there are costs for the classes. So you can see that they just get behind and more behind, and so we've worked some with their costs through that.
How to get to a job, or how to get to a job interview, or how to get to all kinds of places is a challenge. If you don't have a vehicle, even more of a challenge. So we have an account at the Wabash County Transit that people can utilize to get to things like job interviews, doctor's appointments, etc. We also, sometimes people have a vehicle, but don't have gas, so we sometimes give out gas cards. One time, 3 or 4 years ago, a gal was given a used car, but it was sitting about 40 miles away. So we used Growing Grounds money to pay to have it picked up and brought to Wabash and some repairs done on it, so then she would have a vehicle to get around. So transportation is another one of those areas that we try to help out with to the degree that we can.
We occasionally try to, rather than just giving money for folks, we try to encourage them to take a no-interest loan, which means we give them money. And an example of this was early on, there was a woman that I had met in jail, and she'd been out in rehab, and she got out of rehab and had no money, nothing, and it was immediately confronted with payments to the jail system, to the probation system, to get tested for drugs, all these payments, and she had no money, and she was going to lose the apartment that she had gotten and have to go back to jail, and she had no options. And so we gave her a no-interest loan to pay off her stuff so she could get started on her life again. And she is a case that she actually did pay us back eventually through time. So it did happen. We go into this with the expectation that we're probably not going to get the money back, but we at least try to work with them to give them the satisfaction of paying back their loans.
I'm going to comment just a little on the no-interest payments, because last night on my phone came a call from a mom, and single mom now, with a 6-month-old and a 1.5-year-old, and they'd been living and sleeping in her car. She had a job at a fast food restaurant, long hours, because as you know, they can't find help, and so the people that they do hire are there for many hours. She had gone to a landlord in Wabash and filled out the papers, and everything was going to work, it seemed, but then it came up that she had a back $500+ bill from Duke Energy, and she knew nothing about this. She knew it wasn't hers. And in an investigation, it had been a relative of hers that put her name and Social Security number down. And so she can't rent because of that outstanding bill. So we've been on the phone nonstop with her this morning and last night to work out a loan in this case, because she is working, she has a tax check coming, and some other things. I think we'll help her in other ways too, but at least we'll get the loan paid now so that she can get into the housing. So that's an aspect of that. Emergency shelter, oh my goodness, here's Nights Inn, our familiar place for many years for paying and putting people into housing, emergency housing, because Wabash has never had a shelter. The cost now is $315 a week to house a person at Nights Inn. And they've just added a $100 deposit payment also that you need to give in this case. So you can see it's really expensive to have people there, which is why we're trying so hard to get apartments ready so that we can put people into these emergency apartments. Oh my, do we have years of stories from the Habitat apartment. Habitat had an apartment that they could not officially rent out themselves, and we found out about that and decided, well, our church could pay Habitat to house, in this case, we made it 2 women, it had 2 bedrooms. We pay the utilities, we pay renter's insurance, and they would have quick temporary housing. Well, we did this for lots of years, and we have scary stories, hopeful stories, all kinds of stories from this experience. But it housed women who would otherwise have been homeless. Most of these women had 3 or 4 children who were spread out everywhere. And they could not be at this apartment. So we had a lot of incentive to get them on their feet and back with their children, hopefully.
So about 2 years ago, we learned of an organization that's worked in surrounding counties more than Wabash, called Advantage Housing. And when we came across them, they were trying to purchase this house on Hill Street in Wabash to turn it into 4-unit apartments. So there's 2 efficiency apartments and 2 3-bedroom apartments. And the idea is that we could use this property to help with the emergency housing in Wabash. And so, like I said, we gave Advantage Housing $10,000 to help purchase this house. And we've since also given them funds to another $5,000 or something like that to rehabilitate the house. It's a fixer-upper. And then last year, it turned out that the Beecham family in Wabash had a small apartment house on Wabash Street near the bridge, and that they were willing to give to Advantage Housing. And so they donated that apartment, but again, it was a real fixer-upper. And so we've donated about $10,000 to help rehabilitate 571, and it has 6 efficiency apartments. We've also put a lot of sweat equity into this, about 250 hours of demolition and painting and putting in plumbing and pulling out things. It's a lot of work. But the idea here is that by hopefully in a month or so, the 571 host house will provide emergency housing for 6 families. And that we hope that by the fall, the Hill Street host house will provide housing for 4 more. So Wabash, which has not had an emergency shelter, will have 10 of these low-cost options. And by low cost, I mean it depends on the circumstances of the tenant. In many cases, we or one of the other sponsoring agencies will pick up rent for the first few weeks or possibly even months as we help them find more permanent housing. And so this is, again, one of the partnerships that Growing Grounds has had. And so that's our story, and we're sticking with it. we would be very happy to talk more about any questions that you would have. Thank you.
I just want to say with the HAWK, Housing Action Wabash County, that meets the third Wednesday of every month at 2 o'clock at our church. And folks are welcome to come to that. Some of you have been there. But you're also welcome to get the minutes from that if we have your email. So that's a possibility. Jim mentioned Advantage Housing, and they have been such, and the director, Dale Bliss, has been such a resource for us. And so we work closely with them, and we'll do that in the future also.
And I just did what I mentioned when we think about the future, is that Jim and I were working in one of the FAR unit, and we were working in there, and we got a call from Dale, who is from Advantage Housing, and he's already got these 2 projects going, and Jim and I were doing some work in that one, and he called us and said, I'm looking at another unit that has like 9 units or something in it. Do you think I'm crazy? And I think you have to be a little crazy to step out for some of these things. So Dale's teaching us how to be crazy.
Are there questions?
How do you get funded?
Yeah, so we're having some questions. The question is, how do you get funded? And one of the presenters will answer that. Jim?
A variety of ways. We have our baseline funding is really through independent contributions from the Wabash Church of the Brethren. But we had many other organizations as well. I mean, we mentioned Global Women's Project, many others. We've also had businesses, Goodfellas Pizza, and we've had the Knights of Columbus run fundraisers for us, the Manchester Inmate Ministry, the Manchester Church of the Brethren has been a wonderful contributor. And then on top of that, we've had many individuals, perhaps some in this room, who have contributed. So, we get money from a variety of sources. It's mostly a lot of small donations. I mean, we don't go after grants. We haven't had $10,000, $100,000 grants. Most of the grants we have had have been in the neighborhood of $1,000 to $3,000, and we're always open to accepting more. We're not an independent organization, so if you feel so moved, checks can be made out to the Wabash Church of the Brethren with growing grounds in the memo line. Thank you for that question.
Who has the hard job of teaching tenants how to not to wreck a property?
Okay, the question was, who teaches these tenants that you're having in your properties how to take care of the property?
Yeah, and follow basic rules of noise. We have a little bit in a house like that, if somebody's making a lot of noise at midnight. You have the people there have
Well, Joanne knows about what she speaks because she went into a contract arrangement with one of our women, and it has been a many-year journey for Joanne and Bob, and up and down. But she tells me this morning that the woman will pay off her last payment here soon. And taking care of the property is, Advantage Housing will really be a partner with us in this, but these apartments look much better now after thousands and thousands of dollars work, not only from Growing Grounds, but many grants that Advantage Housing has written, and donors. So we do want to keep those properties nice. The entity, like if Growing Grounds would enter a person from calls we get into one of these apartments, we would see ourselves as the case managers for that person or family. So we need to commit to walk with them. Advantage Housing will also walk with them in many ways and work at the property. We think eventually that we'll hire, and Advantage Housing will be in on this, hire a person to oversee the people and the properties, and so we'll have that layer also. But that's a big consideration, because even though we know through the Habitat apartment experience, even though you have them sign agreements that are very explicit, you never know what you'll find when you go up there into the apartment.
Any other questions from our audience? We're happy to have, I think I counted 17 people here this morning, and so that's wonderful. Yes, June. The question is, what is about Advantage Housing, that organization, and how are they, I guess, funded or...
Yeah, Advantage Housing is a nonprofit that was actually started by Dale Bliss. The whole origin story, I think, is on the internet, and basically it started out with Dale is an ex-pastor, I would still say minister. And he and his wife started out by purchasing a couple of small apartments to rent out for low cost housing in Kokomo, and eventually this has just grown and grown. So it's a nonprofit agency. And they've been working with the state housing folks for quite a few years now. So they have an excellent reputation, which has really helped out a lot. For example, just I guess about six or 8 weeks ago now, I got a call from Dale, and he wanted me to make some measurements, because he said he got a call from the state, and they have grant money that has to be spent by April 30th. I'm sorry, had to be committed by April 30th, actually spent by the end of the summer, I believe. And he said, so they know he could spend money. So I said he could apply for up to $100,000 grant if he could promise to get the money spent in the next couple of months. And the state knows that that Dale is the can-do guy who can do that. And so, you know, he said he has an excellent reputation, has gotten wonderful results. He said in the 5-county region, and right now he's said that his favorite county right now is Wabash, because he's gotten more support from us than the other counties. So yeah, it's Advantage Housing is a nonprofit. It's not a real big organization. I think there's like 4 employees or something like that, but they have a mammoth impact, mostly through the use of volunteers. Does that answer your question?
Anything else you want to bring up? I think the folks will probably be here a little bit for a few minutes after the program's over if you want to ask them individual questions. And if you happen to bring your checkbook with you today, I'm sure they would accept a donation, but that's not expected today, but certainly if you want to donate, Jim gave the information. Jeanette?
Do they begin to work with people in the jail and help them come to the fine, you know, they help work with them before they're out of jail?
The question is, how do they work with people who are in jail before they're released?
Dennis, Carol, and I have all taught classes in the jail in nutrition, in financial planning, in budgeting, and other kinds of things. But because of the pandemic, nobody's allowed in the jail right now. It is our hope that we will start again on those kinds of things once it's safe to do that. But we're hoping that the folks that we work with in the apartments, like the Growing Grounds folks we put in, we will be working with them on those kinds of life issues. But Dennis and Carol and I have all been in and out of the classwork at the jail, and I think that will continue after the pandemics.
So you know these people before you put them in emergency housing?
When we were all in the jail weekly doing classes, not only did we know them, but we watched them cycle through. We would work with women, they would get out of jail. And one story that I have is that I worked with a young woman. She got out of jail. I hadn't seen her for a year, and she came back and she'd lost a lot of weight. And I said, "You really lost a lot of weight. What did you do?" And she looked at me and she said, "Kay, I'm a drug addict." And so it made me realize that she was saying that she was back in jail because she was back on drugs. So we saw them cycle through the system several times. And so doing that, walking with that Carol talked about, doing that, being there for them, both in the jail and out of the jail. And some of them only knew about us because we were in the jail with them, and others heard about us because of someone they knew that had been in the jail with our classes. So we're hoping that those will continue afterwards.
Can you tell us about the drug rehabilitation programs in Wabash County, what's available?
Well, they're really working at making that happen. Does someone
Want to repeat the question?
Oh, the question is, what's happening with drug rehabilitation for folks in Wabash County? Carol, can you speak to that more clearly than I can, maybe? There is an organization happening, but I'll let Carol talk about it.
In our church, in working closely with probation, we've had NA, Al-Anon. We now have a yoga group through probation that comes to have yoga once a week at church. as far, it's a struggle. I don't know what to say about rehab with the drugs. We know that we hear their stories, and we know that they lived with abuse in young years, or just chaos, or neglect. And so they self-medicate with the drugs. And then it's hard, as you know, to get off. I've taken people to Marion. Suboxone is a drug that's now given as a substitute to wean them off. So some are on that, and now Bowen Center is offering that. Hope House, they hope to get started for women soon in Wabash County, but we've paid fees to send them to the one in Marion. It's just a daily struggle with that for them. And that's why we sometimes think where we've got to put more and more energy is into the young children and get them into programs. In fact, we were on the phone this morning trying to find out what summer programs are available, have openings still, how much they cost, and how we can get some of these kids into programs. I think that's one of our big hopes, is through the children.
The question was, how big is the Wabash Church of the Brethren in their attendance? Which
Well, during COVID, up until 2 Sundays ago, the average in-person attendance was 0. But we were online over that time, and now we're doing sort of a hybrid where some are online and some are in person. Before COVID, I'll have to go back to that, we were averaging maybe 35 or so would be an average. So it's not a big congregation, but a lot of people with a big heart, and that's what counts.
We've come to the end of our program, and again, I want to thank these 4 presenters for giving us all this information, helpful and useful information. Carol and Dennis Horn and Jim and Kay Geyer. We thank you very much. The Seniors for Peace will take our normal summer break after today, and we'll resume our meeting in September, and hopefully maybe without these masks, and I'm not sure. We'll have to wait and see how that turns out. But thank you all for coming, and have a good day.